In the forest's heart, where silver fog clung to the bones of fallen pines, a girl ran barefoot through mud and moonlight. Her name was Elara Winvale, the lowest of her kind, an Omega servant in the borderlands of the Crescent Dominion, born to silence, meant to be unseen. Yet that night, the world saw her. Her breath came in torn gasps, her cloak snagged on thorns, her skin streaked with blood not her own. Somewhere ahead, a child cried. A sound so small, so pure, it pierced the storm. Elara stumbled into a clearing. 3 rogues crouched around a shattered carriage, their bodies half-shifted, claws dripping, eyes wild, and between them, trapped under a fallen wheel, was a boy no older than 6. His tunic was woven of royal silk, soaked in crimson and rainwater. His eyes, pale silver, almost luminous, were filled with terror. The mark on his wrist told the truth her heart already feared. He was of the Lycon bloodline, the blood of kings. She should have fled. An Omega had no right to touch the Alpha's kin, no right even to look upon them. But the child's cry trembled like a song from another life. Before thought could stop her, Elara moved. Her body was frail, her wolf small, but desperation lends its own kind of power. She seized a burning branch from the wreck and struck. The scent of scorched fur and iron filled the night. She didn't remember how she fought, only that she did. When the last rogue fell, silence returned, broken only by the ragged breathing of 2 survivors. Elara dropped to her knees beside the boy, her hands trembling as she freed him from the wreckage. "You're safe," she whispered, though the words felt like a lie. "You're safe now, little one." The boy's small fingers clung to her torn sleeve. "My name is Arik," he whispered. "Arik Kaelborn." Her breath stilled. The name was a crown. The name was a death sentence. Because only one carried that name, the son of Kael, the Alpha King of the Black Throne. And far away in the citadel where the moon never touched the stones, the king awoke from his restless trance, his wolf rising within him as the scent of his son's blood reached his soul. He felt it. Someone had touched his blood. Chapter 1, The Omega and the Storm. Morning broke like a secret, grey, trembling, and heavy with memory. Elara had hidden the boy deep within a hunter's den, wrapping him in her only cloak. The forest smelled of smoke and wet earth. Crows perched in solemn rows upon the branches, their black wings gleaming like morning veils. Arik slept fitfully, his hand curled around hers as if afraid she might disappear. She watched him, the way his silver eyes flickered beneath his lashes, the faint glow of his bloodline pulsing through his veins, and felt something she could neither name nor justify. In her village, Omegas were trained not to feel, not to want. Their worth lay in obedience, in quiet service. But there, in that trembling dawn, Elara's heart betrayed her. It wasn't desire, not yet. It was something more dangerous, attachment. The wind shifted, and the forest bowed. He came like the coming of a storm, unseen, then everywhere. The air grew colder, charged with something ancient. The birds stilled, even the rain seemed to hold its breath. When Elara turned, she saw him emerge from the mists, black armor, silver eyes that burned without warmth, and a presence that swallowed sound itself. King Kael of the Black Throne. He was taller than she imagined, not merely a man, but something wrought from myth and midnight. His hair was dark as storm water, his gaze carried the weight of centuries. Elara's knees buckled. She lowered her head, her breath trembling in her chest. "My king." He didn't answer. He looked past her, at the boy in her arms. For a heartbeat his expression cracked, relief, so brief she wondered if she imagined it. Then it vanished, replaced by the cold authority of an alpha who ruled worlds with silence. "Step away from him." She obeyed. The king knelt before his son, his touch reverent, his aura thick with restrained violence. Arik clung to him but pointed at Alara. "She saved me, father. The bad wolves were going to—" Kael's gaze lifted to her. It was like being struck by lightning. "You touched royal blood," he said quietly. Alara couldn't speak. She felt his power pressing against her lungs, ancient magic thrumming through her skin. "Yes, my king," she whispered finally. "He was bleeding. You defied the law." "I defied death," she said before she could stop herself. The words escaped like a heartbeat too strong to silence. A dangerous stillness fell. Then, softly, the king said, "You will not die for it." Hope flickered. Too soon. But you will not walk free. Chapter 2. The Black Palace. The citadel of Ebonvale was carved into the cliffs overlooking the hollow sea. Its walls were obsidian, veined with silver light that pulsed like living veins through stone. The air smelled of salt and smoke, and the sea below roared like a caged god. Alara had never known such silence. Here the servants moved like shadows, their eyes averted, their words scarce. The palace itself seemed alive, its corridors breathing in rhythm with the tides. Every mirror was covered, every flame burned blue, and everywhere she went, she felt the king's gaze, unseen but constant. Her chambers were small but immaculate. Each morning, a quiet maid named Mirelle brought her food and wordless pity. A physician, Lord Saran Vale, examined her bruises with detached interest, muttering about divine anomalies in her blood, traces of moon magic that shouldn't exist in an Omega. Days became weeks. She saw the prince sometimes, bright, curious Arik, slipping past guards to sit by her fire and ask her stories. When he laughed, the palace almost felt human. Until his father entered. Kael's presence emptied the air. His voice was quiet, his words measured, but every sentence felt carved from iron. He questioned her, always without anger, but with precision that stripped her bare. "You killed 3 rogues alone," he said one night, the firelight flickering across his jaw. "How?" "I didn't think," she answered softly. "I only felt—" He studied her, long and silent. "And when you looked at my son, what did you feel?" She hesitated. "That he was precious, and that I had no right." His eyes darkened, but not with fury. With something she didn't understand, a flicker of hunger, of recognition. "No right," he repeated, tasting the words. "And yet you saved him." The distance between them felt thin. The air trembled, neither spoke, and for one dangerous moment, neither breathed. Chapter 3. Threads of Moonlight. That night, the sea rose higher than ever, waves striking the cliffs like heartbeats. Alara dreamt of silver threads binding her wrists, threads that led through stone, through shadow, into the king's chambers. When she woke, her pulse was not her own. She found herself drawn to the balcony where the tide glowed faintly with moonfire. The scent of salt and steel wrapped around her, and she realized she was not alone. Kael stood there, bare-armed, his cloak falling like shadow. The wind tangled his hair, his expression unreadable. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice low. "The sea," she whispered. He turned to her, slow, deliberate. "No, the bond." Her heart stopped. He stepped closer, the world narrowing to the sound of the rain, the brush of his breath. "You touched royal blood," he said, as if confessing a sin. "That act binds you to it." "To me. It was never mercy, Alara. It was consequence." Her lips parted, words failing. "Then, what happens now?" Kyle's gaze fell to her mouth, only for a heartbeat. "Now," he said softly, "we learn what kind of bond it is." And when he left her there, trembling in the silver dawn, the sea roared below like prophecy. Chapter 4. The Garden of Shadows. The palace slept under moonlight. Every corridor whispered in its sleep. The torches burned low, their blue flames sighing against the cold. Elara had not slept. Her chamber felt smaller each night, too full of questions, too full of his voice that lingered even after he was gone. When she closed her eyes, she saw his eyes, his silence, the way the air itself seemed to kneel when he spoke. She rose before dawn and wandered through the halls barefoot, her fingers tracing the old stone. The air smelled faintly of myrrh and sea salt. Somewhere far below, the waves beat against the cliff in steady rhythm, as if the world itself was counting her steps. She did not mean to find the garden. It lay hidden behind an arched gate of rusted silver, a forgotten place where ivy had devoured marble angels, and pale flowers grew through cracks in the flagstone. The moon made the petals shimmer like frost. The air was alive with the hum of unseen insects and the faint echo of music that wasn't really there. Elara stepped in carefully, as though entering a prayer. Every breath she took felt different here, lighter, more dangerous. And then she heard him. "Most servants avoid this place," a low voice said from the shadows. "They say the dead still walk here." Her heart stumbled. Kyle emerged from between the columns, his cloak unfastened, his hands bare. The silver in his eyes was dim tonight, softer, weary. He looked less like a king, and more like a man who had forgotten how to be one. Elara lowered her gaze. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You did," he said, but his tone lacked venom. He came closer, slow and deliberate. "The garden has no owner, only memories." She dared to look up. "Whose memories?" He paused, then glanced toward the stone bench at the center of the garden, a place overgrown with white vines. "My queen's," he said quietly. "She died here." The words seemed to bleed into the night. Elara felt them, heavy and human. She said nothing because there was nothing safe to say. Kyle's gaze drifted over the vines. This garden was hers. She planted it the year Arik was born. After her death, no flower would bloom here. Until last week. Elara's breath caught. Last week, when you arrived, the silence that followed was fragile. The night wind moved through the garden, brushing the leaves like a whisper. Kyle turned to her then, and his expression shifted. No longer the cold ruler she'd known, but something almost wondering. "You carry moonlight in your blood," he said. "Do you know that?" She shook her head. "I am only Omega-born, my king." "No," he said, stepping closer. "No ordinary Omega can fight rogues without shifting. No ordinary Omega can survive a bond with royal blood. You are something else." Elara felt the air between them thicken, the pulse in her throat quickening. She took a step back, but the vines brushed her arm and caught her sleeve, soft as a hand. Kyle watched her, his gaze tracing the small tremor of her breath, the way her fingers trembled against the fabric. "Do you fear me?" he asked. She wanted to lie, to say yes, to make it simple, but the truth slipped out instead. "I don't know." He smiled faintly without warmth. "That is more dangerous than fear." He turned away then, his cloak sweeping the petals from the ground. "You should rest. The council will meet at dawn. They will ask questions about you, and about the bond. Answer carefully." Elara's voice broke the hush. "And if they ask what you intend to do with me?" He paused, his back still to her. "I haven't decided." Then he left her there, surrounded by flowers that shouldn't have bloomed, in a garden that had woken for her. At sunrise, the palace roared back to life. Servants hurried through the corridors, nobles gathered in the high chamber, and banners of black and silver hung like heavy shadows. Elara followed Mirael through winding passages until the great doors opened before her. The council chamber was vast, lined with carved walls and crystal sconces that dripped with light. At its center sat the king, a circle of advisers surrounding him, Lord Saran Vale, the physician whose eyes were sharp as knives, Lady Lysandra, the king's cousin and high chancellor, her beauty edged with cruelty, and Commander Thane Varro, the captain of the royal guard, tall, scarred, and watchful. Every gaze turned to Elara as she entered. Lady Lysandra smiled thinly. "So this is the Omega who touched the royal heir. I expected more." Elara bowed low, saying nothing. Saran adjusted his rings. "My king, the girl's blood carries traces of the moon's essence. It is not possible unless—" "Unless what?" Kyle asked quietly. "Unless she was chosen," Saran said. The word echoed through the room. Lysandra laughed, soft and venomous. "Chosen? By the moon itself? Don't be absurd. She's a servant." Kyle's gaze never left Elara. "And yet the bond exists. Do you doubt your own magic, Saran?" The physician hesitated. "No, my king. Only the meaning of it." Elara stood still, her hands clasped, the air thick with judgment. Then Kyle spoke again, his voice low enough that only she seemed to truly hear it. "Tell me, Elara Winvale, when you saved my son, did you call upon the moon?" Her eyes lifted to his. "No, my king. I only called upon my heart." Something in his face changed. The faintest tremor of restraint, the shadow of feeling he didn't want. The chamber fell silent. And in that silence the bond pulsed, unseen but undeniable, alive beneath their skin like a living secret. That night, when the palace slept once more, Elara returned to the garden. The flowers were open again, glowing faintly in the moonlight. She sank to her knees among them, the scent of their petals heavy and sweet. She did not notice the shadow watching from the gate, tall, still, eyes of silver flame. Kyle stood there, unguarded, unseen. He watched her fingers trace the petals, her lips move in a prayer too soft to hear. Something in his chest, that ancient, sleeping thing, stirred again. And for the first time in years, the Alpha King of the Black Throne whispered a truth meant for no one. "Moon Keeper," he said, "because I cannot." Chapter 5. The Silver Veil. The sea mist clung to the palace walls that morning, heavy and white as breath on glass. Every tower of Ebonvale seemed veiled in pale sorrow. Bells rang in the distance, soft, ceremonial, the sound of a kingdom waking or mourning. Elara woke before dawn. The night's dreams had left her trembling. She had dreamt of a field of white wolves bowing before the moon, and of Kyle standing among them, eyes hollow, a silver thread binding their wrists together before burning to ash. The dream lingered like incense, haunting, beautiful, and wrong. Mirael entered quietly, her dark hair braided with white ribbons, her eyes swollen with fatigue. "My lady," she whispered, voice thin as smoke, "His Majesty has summoned you to the Hall of Veils." "The Hall of Ceremonial Court," Mirael explained, setting a robe of pale grey on the bed. "The nobles have arrived from the outer dominions. They wish to see the one who bears the bond." Elara's fingers hesitated over the robe. "See me? As a curiosity?" "As a warning," Mirael murmured. "The court loves its omens." The Hall of Veils was unlike any chamber Elara had seen. Its walls were draped with gossamer silks that moved in unseen draughts, their folds rippling like living things. Light fell through crystal latticework above, scattering across the marble floor in slow-moving patterns of silver. The nobles gathered like stars around the throne, bright, cold, distant. They whispered behind jeweled fans and masks, their gazes flickering toward her with curiosity and disdain. At the center, on the dais of onyx and bone, sat King Kael, dressed in black and starlight. His expression was calm, unreadable, but his eyes, when they met hers, held that same quiet violence that always unmade her. Beside him stood Prince Arik, small but proud, clutching a carved wooden wolf. And behind them, the High Chancellor Lady Lysandra, radiant in scarlet silk, her smile sharp as frost. Lysandra's voice filled the hall. "Behold," she said smoothly, "the Omega who carries the king's bond, touched by moonlight, they say. Some call it divine, some call it curse." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Elara stood still beneath the weight of their eyes. Her robe felt too thin, her heart pounded too loud. The silks above her swayed like waves caught in slow motion. Kael did not laugh. He rose slowly, every motion deliberate. "A curse?" he repeated. "If saving my heir from death is a curse, then may the moon curse us all." The laughter died. He descended the dais and stopped before her, close enough that she could feel the pulse of his power, that strange, cold heat that both terrified and drew her. "Elara Windveil," he said, voice low enough that it seemed to belong to both of them alone. "Step forward." She obeyed, trembling. He reached out, his hand hovering just above her wrist. The court leaned forward, hungry. "The bond mark," he said softly. "Show them." Elara hesitated, then rolled back her sleeve. A pale silver mark shimmered beneath her skin, faint as moonlight on water, a sigil that pulsed with each beat of her heart. The symbol of the royal line intertwined with another she did not recognize. Gasps spread through the hall. Saren, the physician, stepped closer, his eyes wide. "That second symbol, that is the mark of the first wolves, the ancient blood." Lysandra's smile faltered. "Impossible, impossible," Kael repeated softly, but his gaze stayed locked on Elara's wrist, on the thread of fate now glowing between them. "And yet, it breathes." The murmurs turned to unease. Elara lowered her arm, her voice unsteady. "I did not ask for this, my king." He looked at her then, truly looked, and the mask of sovereignty wavered. "Neither did I." For a long heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Lysandra's voice cut through the silence, brittle and cold. "If the bond is of divine origin, then tradition demands the silver veil ceremony. The moon must judge the union, or sever it." Elara froze. "Sever?" "The veil," Mirel whispered from behind her, pale as wax. "It's the right of truth. If the bond is impure, the moon tears it apart. Through blood." Kael's eyes narrowed. "You would risk my son's bond for your curiosity?" Lysandra bowed with mock grace. "Not curiosity, Majesty. Law. The nobles will not rest until they see proof that the bond does not endanger the throne." He said nothing for a long time. The storm gathered behind his silence. Then, quietly, Kael turned to Elara. "Tonight," he said, "we face the veil." That night, the moon rose full and white above the cliffs, a cold eye watching the world below. The hall of veils had been transformed into a circle of mirrors and fire. The nobles gathered again, cloaked and masked, while the priests of the Moonkeep intoned the old hymns. Elara stood in the center of the circle, barefoot, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her breath shivered in the chilled air. Across from her, Kael stepped into the ring. No armor, no crown, only his wolf-marked skin and eyes that burned like eclipsed stars. The High Priestess, Serenia of the Veil, lifted her hands. The bond between Alpha and Omega was never meant to cross bloodlines. Tonight, the moon shall judge what fate has done. The mirrors brightened, each reflecting a different piece of moonlight. Threads of silver smoke rose around them, twisting like living spirits. "Touch palms," the priestess commanded. Kyle extended his hand. Elara hesitated, her heart a storm, but when her fingers met his, the world vanished. A surge of warmth flooded her, not pain, but recognition. 1,000 memories not her own flashed behind her eyes. Kyle as a boy, standing before the ashes of his father, the birth of Arik, the night he lost his queen to darkness. And beneath it all his loneliness, vast, endless, unspoken. Her breath broke. She felt his pain as her own. And Kyle, he felt hers. The hunger, the smallness, the years of silence, the terror of being seen. The smoke around them thickened, brightening until the mirrors shattered one by one. The court gasped. The priestess fell to her knees. When the last mirror broke, the light poured into the bond mark on their wrists, burning like silver fire. Kyle caught her as she swayed, his voice rough. "Elara." The priestess's voice trembled. "It is done. The moon does not sever such a bond, it sanctifies it." A silence deeper than sound followed. Kyle looked at her, at the tears glimmering on her lashes, at the mark now blazing with both their sigils entwined. For the first time he looked uncertain. Elara whispered, barely able to stand. "What does it mean?" Kyle's voice was low, almost a confession. "It means you are no longer mine to command." Then he turned away before the court could see his face. And the moon, pale and pitiless, watched them both. Two souls bound not by power or law, but by the kind of bond that promised to unmake them. Chapter 6. The King Who Could Not Dream. The dawn came slow and heavy, as though the sky itself feared to wake. The rain had returned, soft and ceaseless, wrapping the spires of Ebonvale in a shroud of silver mist. The echoes of the previous night, the shattered mirrors, the moon's judgment, the whispers of divinity, still trembled through the corridors like the ghost of a song unfinished. Kyle had not slept. Sleep was a luxury long forgotten, a language he no longer spoke. But that night, when he closed his eyes, the dreams would not come, not even the dark ones. The bond had silenced them. He stood by the balcony, shirt undone, rain glimmering against his bare shoulders. Below him the sea crashed endlessly against the cliffs, a rhythm both familiar and cruel. The mark on his wrist burned faintly, a pulse that was not his alone. He pressed his thumb to it, and somewhere in the lower chambers of the east wing, Elara stirred from her own restless half-sleep. Their bond was still new, fragile, alive, unpredictable. He could feel her thoughts sometimes like whispers behind a closed door, could sense when her breath quickened, when her heart faltered. It was maddening, intimate, unforgivable. Elara awoke to the scent of petrichor and fading firelight. Mirael had drawn the curtains halfway, letting the morning spill in through gauze. Her body felt fevered, her skin marked by the faint ache of the ceremony. The mark had changed overnight, the silver now threaded with veins of gold as if something divine had taken root beneath her skin. She touched it, and for an instant saw flashes of Kyle's memory again. A crown in blood, a child's cry, a promise broken beneath a red moon. She gasped and drew her hand back. The visions vanished, but the ache in her chest did not. "Still hurting?" Mirael asked softly from the doorway, carrying a bowl of water and herbs. "The veil leaves traces on the soul more than the skin." Elara shook her head. "It's not pain, it's him." Mirael hesitated. "The king?" Alara nodded, her fingers trembling. "I can feel him, even when I try not to." By mid-morning the palace had begun to shift again, nobles whispering behind curtained alcoves, priests debating the meaning of the moon's verdict. The name Alara Winvale spread like wildfire, dressed in rumor and awe. Some called her the moon's bride, others the cursed heir. Kyle, meanwhile, had withdrawn into his council chamber, his expression harder than steel. The room smelled of rain and old parchment. Maps of the outer dominions lay spread across the table, ink still wet from his restless hand. Lord Garin, the general, spoke first. "Majesty, the bond has emboldened the rebels in the north. They believe the prophecy has begun." Kyle looked up, eyes shadowed. "What prophecy?" Garin hesitated. "The one of the silver veil. That a king would one day be bound to the soul of the lost line, the line of the first wolves, and through that bond, the old gods would rise again." Lysandra, standing by the window, gave a brittle laugh. "Superstition. The people will cling to anything if it promises a crown soaked in miracles." But Kyle did not smile. Superstition once brought this kingdom to ruin. A silence fell. Outside, thunder rolled far away. That evening, Alara was summoned to the king's private study, a place few ever saw. The corridor leading there was lined with portraits, their eyes following her like watchful ancestors. When she entered, Kyle did not turn immediately. He stood by the hearth, the firelight painting his face in bronze and shadow. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "You summoned me. I shouldn't have." Her heart stung. "You fear me, my king?" He turned then sharply, beautifully. "No. I fear what I feel when I look at you." The words struck her like lightning. She could not breathe. Kyle stepped closer, the air between them trembling. "This bond, it wasn't meant for mortals. When I close my eyes, I see through yours. When you hurt, I bleed. Tell me, how do I command a kingdom when half my soul disobeys me?" Alara's voice shook. "Then sever it. You know it cannot be severed." The fire crackled between them, its light flickering over their faces. His jaw clenched in restraint, her lips parted with unspoken ache. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why would the moon choose me?" Kyle's eyes softened, just for a breath. "Because the moon is cruel, and perhaps because she knows what it means to love from afar." The rain outside grew heavier, a symphony against the glass. Neither moved. Then a knock at the door shattered the silence. "Majesty," said a voice from the hall. "Lord Taran, the court seer. Forgive the intrusion. The Oracle of Dusk requests audience. She claims to have seen the shadow beneath your bond." Kyle's expression changed. "The Oracle?" Alara felt her pulse quicken. "What shadow?" Lord Taran hesitated before answering. "She says, one of you was never meant to live past the bond's awakening." The chamber fell utterly still. The fire dimmed, as if the air itself recoiled. Kyle turned slowly toward Alara. For the first time since she met him, she saw fear. Not for the kingdom, not for his bloodline, but for her. "Find her," he said to Taran, voice dark and low. "Bring the oracle to me by nightfall." When the seer left, Kyle looked back at Alara. His hand reached for hers, stopped just short. "Alara," he said softly, as if the word itself was fragile. "No matter what they say, you are not the shadow." She lifted her eyes to his, tears gleaming like stars. "And if you are?" He smiled faintly, bitterly. "Then may the gods envy what burns between us." Outside the storm broke, lightning lacing the sea, thunder shaking the bones of Ebonvale. The mark on both their wrists flared, answering the heavens with silver fire. Neither of them yet knew the prophecy had already begun its work. And in the deepest corner of the world, beneath ruined stone and forgotten prayer, something ancient opened its eyes. Chapter 7. The Oracle of Dusk. Night descended not with stars, but with smoke. The wind carried whispers through the spires of Ebonvale, the kind that curled between stones and candles, the kind that even the walls feared to hear. Elara stood in the gallery that overlooked the eastern courtyard, her palms pressed to the cold glass. The rain had not stopped all day. Each drop seemed to echo her heartbeat, her pulse caught between dread and desire. They said the Oracle of Dusk had once been mortal, before the gods claimed her eyes. She spoke only in twilight, when light and darkness were still arguing over the sky. When the guards came for Elara, they did not speak. She followed them through corridors draped in shadow, her footsteps soft against the marble. The scent of myrrh hung heavy, thick, sacred, suffocating. The hall of divination was circular, built of onyx and old magic. Candles burned in uneven circles, their flames bending toward a single figure seated in the center, a woman wrapped in layers of grey and midnight blue, her face half veiled, her hair streaked with silver like moonlight drowned in ash. Her eyes were clouded white. And yet, when they turned toward Elara, it felt as if she was seen completely. "Child of the Veil," the oracle said, her voice layered, young and ancient at once. "You walk in borrowed light." Elara's breath hitched. "You mean the bond?" The oracle tilted her head. "I mean the curse that wears itself as love." The doors opened behind them. Kyle entered, tall and silent, his presence pulling the light toward him like gravity. The guards bowed and retreated, leaving only the three of them and the storm beyond the walls. The oracle smiled faintly. "Ah, the dreamless king." Kyle's voice was low, cautious. "You've seen something. I have seen everything that remains of you." She rose slowly, her robes whispering across the floor. Between her hands shimmered a shallow bowl of silver water. She lifted it to her lips, murmured a prayer in the forgotten tongue, and the surface darkened, revealing fragments that moved like memories. A forest of fire, a woman's scream, a crown falling into blood. Elara felt her heart twist. "What is this?" Kyle demanded. "The beginning," the oracle replied, "and the end you now cannot escape." She turned to Elara. "The bond between you was not chosen by the moon. It was stolen." The word fell like thunder. "Stolen?" Kyle echoed. "By whom?" The oracle's blind gaze lifted toward the ceiling. "By the shadow of your first love." Silence. The air froze. Kyle's hands clenched, the veins in his forearms rising. "That cannot be! She is dead." The oracle smiled sadly. "Death does not end what the gods have refused to forget." Elara's throat tightened. "Who was she?" Kyle's eyes flickered. Pain, guilt, something deeper. "Her name was Lysandra." Elara blinked. "Your advisor?" "She was once more than that," the oracle said. "She was the moon's chosen before you. And when the bond was denied her, she made a pact with what sleeps beneath the silver sea." Elara felt the chill crawl up her spine. "The old gods," the oracle nodded. "She traded her soul for the right to linger, unseen, whispering, weaving the threads of fate until the bond fell into another's hand." Kyle stepped forward, voice sharp. "Enough riddles. Tell me what this means for her." "For her?" The oracle turned her blind eyes toward him. "It means she bears the price you were meant to pay. The silver veil must always claim a life, Majesty. It was meant to be yours." The bowl cracked. Water spilled across the floor, smoking where it touched stone. Elara staggered back. Kyle caught her by instinct, his hand against her waist, his breath against her ear. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to the space between them, her fear, his fury, the bond pulsing wild between their skins. "She will die if it remains," he demanded. "Yes," the oracle whispered. "When the moon reaches its third waning, the curse will claim her heart." Alara's voice broke, soft as a prayer. "And if the bond is broken, then your kingdom dies with it." A long silence. The storm outside roared like something alive. Finally Kyle spoke. His voice was hoarse, almost human. "Leave us." The oracle bowed her head. "The dusk has spoken. The choice is yours, King of the Hollow Moon." When she left, the flames guttered low, leaving the chamber bathed in shadow. Alara turned to him, trembling. "You knew there was something wrong. You felt it." "I hoped I was wrong." Her tears shone in the dark. "You should have let me die the night they found me." "Then none of this—" Kyle cut her off with a hand, voice raw. "Don't ever say that. You think I could bear another death carved into me? You think I would watch the gods take you because I am too cowardly to fight fate?" He took a step closer, then another, until his breath mingled with hers. "I have lost too much," she whispered. "If the moon wants blood, she can take mine." She tried to speak, but he silenced her with a single touch, his fingers brushing her jaw, trembling. "Do you trust me?" Her answer came like an exhale. "I want to." He leaned closer, forehead to hers, the firelight trembling around them. "Then don't let them make you afraid of what we are." But as he pulled away, Alara saw it, in the mirror behind him, a flicker of movement where there should have been none, a shadow, delicate as smoke, wearing Lysandra's smile. And when the thunder broke again, her whisper slithered through the room like silk. "Dreamless king, you cannot save her. You already belong to me." Chapter 8. The Woman Beneath the Sea. The sea was not a place for mortals. It was older than grief, older than the moon that watched over it, older even than the wolves who believed they were born from its foam. By the time dawn crept across the horizon, the cliffs of Ebonvale had vanished behind mist and storm. The king rode ahead, his cloak snapping in the wind, his eyes fixed on the edge of the world. Alara followed close behind, hood drawn low, her pulse a drumbeat of dread. They had left the palace before the court could awaken. Only two others rode with them, Taran, the seer, carrying scrolls of forbidden prayers, and Captain Rhea, Kyle's sworn guard, her eyes as sharp as her sword. The oracle's warning still echoed in Alara's mind. "When the sea calls your name, child, it is not water that awaits you, it is memory." The rain had eased, but the air was thick with salt and omen. By midday they reached the shattered coast, a crescent of black sand and bone-white driftwood, where the waves moved with unnatural silence. Rhea dismounted first, scanning the fog. "No birds," she murmured. "No sound." Kyle's voice was low. "She hides beneath the surface. The pact was sealed here." Alara stepped closer to the water. Her boots sank into wet sand, and the tide lapped around her ankles, cold as breath from the grave. Something deep beneath stirred, faint, deliberate. "She's here," Alara whispered. Kyle came beside her, his presence grounding her trembling heart. "Lysandra." His voice carried across the surf. Not a shout, but a call. "Come out. I know you linger." For a long time, nothing. Then the sea began to glow, a deep, sickly silver that spread across the water like ink bleeding through paper. A figure rose from the depths. At first she seemed made of light. Then the light turned to flesh, pale, translucent, threaded with veins of blue and gold. Her hair flowed like seaweed, her gown made of woven tide. When she opened her eyes, they shone with the same unnatural brightness as the moon's heart. "Kyle," she breathed. You remembered where I died. Ilara's breath caught. Lysandra smiled, slow, haunting. And you brought her... Kyle took a step forward. What have you done, Lysandra? What I had to, she said simply. You broke the vow you made to the moon. You loved me once. You swore eternity. And when the crown demanded obedience, you severed us. So I begged the gods beneath the waves to return what was mine. Her voice trembled between grief and madness. They answered. But they asked a price. Taran moved closer, murmuring ancient runes under his breath. The waves shuddered as if in reply. You stole the bond, Kyle said. You forced it onto another. Lysandra's gaze flickered to Ilara, cold and almost tender. Do you think she would have survived the rogues if I hadn't willed it? The night she saved your heir, I saw her dying in the mud. I touched her soul and offered her the bond, your bond. My curse became hers. Ilara's voice trembled. You bound me to him. I gave you power, child. You were nothing, an omega scraping through a cruel world. Now the moon sings your name. Shouldn't you thank me? Kyle's fists clenched. You condemned her. I preserved you, Lysandra hissed. You would have perished beneath that oath long ago. I took your death, Kyle, and wore it as my crown beneath the sea. The gods kept me breathing because my hatred kept burning. The sea began to churn violently. The wind tore through the cliffs and Taran's scrolls whipped free from his hands, the runes blazing mid-air. Rhea drew her blade. Majesty, the tide! Before she could finish, a wave rose high, twisting into the shape of a serpent. Ilara cried out as it struck the sand beside her, leaving a crater of steaming salt water. Kyle moved to shield her. The mark on his wrist burned bright, answering the storm. Lysandra's laughter echoed through the chaos. You cannot fight me, Kyle. You cannot fight what you loved. Ilara's eyes filled with tears, not fear, but fury. Then fight me instead. The air cracked, her mark ignited, not silver now, but white gold, a light that made the waves recoil. Lysandra faltered. What are you doing? Ilara stepped forward, trembling yet unyielding. You may have stolen the bond, but it's mine now. You can have your vengeance, but you will not take my life to feed it. The waves froze in place, suspended mid-air like glass. For a moment, everything held its breath. Kyle reached for her hand, his voice raw. Ilara, stop. The bond is feeding from your soul, but she only looked at him, tears streaking her cheeks, a strange serenity dawning in her eyes. Then let it. If love is a curse, let it be one I choose. The light burst outward. The ocean screamed. When it cleared, the beach lay still. The tide had retreated miles away. Lysandra knelt in the wet sand, her body flickering like a dying flame. Her eyes softened, the madness gone, replaced by something achingly human. She has your heart, she whispered. The part I could never reach. Kyle stepped closer, his voice breaking. Lysandra, but she shook her head. No more words. The gods will take me now, perhaps to where love no longer hurts. Her body dissolved into sea foam. The waves rolled in once, then calmed, as if in mourning. Ilara swayed, her knees buckling. Kyle caught her before she fell, holding her against his chest. Her mark had faded, not gone, but dim, fragile. She's gone, she murmured. Kyle pressed his forehead to hers. No, she's free, and so are we. But in the distance, Taran turned toward the horizon, eyes wide, voice trembling. No, Majesty, something's wrong. They followed his gaze. Beyond the sea, the moon had turned red, bleeding across the water like an open wound, and from the deep, a second voice rose, older, colder. The price is not yet paid. Chapter 9, The Blood Moon's Debt. The sea had gone quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that came only before a world remembered how to scream. Kyle held Ilara against his chest, feeling the faint tremor of her breath. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath his palm, the mark on her wrist dim as candlelight at dawn. He could taste salt on her skin, not from the ocean but from tears neither of them had realized were falling. Behind them, the horizon bled. The blood moon hung above the water, vast and pulsing, staining the waves crimson. It was not the moon of the gods, Kyle knew. This one was older, a relic of the first curse, the one whispered of only in the oldest hymns. Taran fell to his knees, his voice shaking as he opened his scroll. The blood moon's rising means the pact has broken the mortal veil. Majesty, something has been set free. Rhea stepped forward, her blade still drawn. The tide's receding too fast. The air turned black before she could finish. A sound rose, low, guttural and ancient, not thunder, not wind, a voice. Kyle of the hollow moon, the debt is due. The sea erupted. From its depths climbed shapes of shadow and light, twisted, half-formed things made of smoke and memory. They had the faces of wolves, but their eyes were empty voids. One of them stepped forward, dripping water that steamed where it touched the sand. Kyle pulled Ilara behind him. "Old One," he said through clenched teeth. "The pact is broken. Lysandra is gone." The creature tilted its head, a grotesque mimicry of curiosity. "The vessel is gone," it said, "but the vow remains. One heart was promised to the sea. It was never hers to offer." Ilara's knees weakened. "It wants a life," she whispered. Taran looked up, his face white with dread. "Not a life, my queen. The life bound by the silver veil. The heart of the moon's chosen." Kyle's hand tightened around his sword. "No, then the kingdom will bleed instead," the voice said, and the shadows began to move, surging toward the shore. Ilara felt the pull of the bond again, deep, electric, terrible. The light beneath her skin pulsed in rhythm with the blood moon. Each beat made the air around her shimmer. She could see it now, as if a veil had been lifted, the thin silver thread connecting her to Kyle, to his very heartbeat, to his grief. The bond pulsed with both their lives. She turned to him, eyes wide. "Kyle, listen to me. The only way to stop it—" "No." His tone was sharp, desperate. "You will not speak that word. Is to give the sea what it wants." He grabbed her shoulders, shaking his head. "I will not sacrifice you to a dead god." Her voice trembled. "And if you don't, it will take everything else." Lightning split the sky, the sea answering with a roar that made the cliffs tremble. Rhea shouted over the wind, "Majesty, they're coming through!" Kyle turned, his aura flaring with silver fire, the mark on his wrist blazing brighter than the moon itself. He raised his hand, and the shadows recoiled as if burned. His voice thundered across the beach, "You will not take her!" The ground shook. The waves froze mid-air. For one heartbeat, Kyle seemed less man than myth, the king of wolves, the blood of the first alpha made flesh. But even gods could bleed. The strain bent him forward. The mark on his chest seared through his shirt, glowing like molten silver. Ilara reached for him and felt the pain shoot through her own body. Their bond screamed. Taran shouted something, a prayer, a plea, and threw a vial of sanctified salt toward the waves. The explosion of white fire threw the creatures back for a moment, enough for them to breathe. "Majesty," he gasped, "there is one way left. The bond can be inverted." The life debt shifted from the veil to the crown. Kyle looked up, blood running from his nose. "Explain." "If the king willingly offers his blood, his line, the gods may accept it as balance." Ilara froze. "No." Taran met her eyes. "It would spare you, my queen, but it will end him." She turned to Kyle, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on her face. "Don't you dare." He smiled, softly, tiredly. "You forget, little one. I am the dreamless king. Death and I are old friends." Before she could stop him, he drew his dagger and pressed it to his palm. The blade gleamed silver under the red moon. The sea fell silent. Even the wind seemed to bow. "I offer my blood to the gods beneath," Kyle said, voice steady as stone. "Let the moon's debt fall upon me, and me alone." The moment the words left him, the bond flared so bright Elara screamed. The world fractured. She saw flashes. Kyle as a boy, kneeling before his father's corpse, the first time he wore the crown, the night he buried his mother beneath the snow. Every loss, every burden, every dream he'd locked away. And then she saw herself. The moment their eyes met in the temple, the night he almost killed her and didn't. The way his breath had trembled when he touched her face. The bond trembled like a dying star. Kyle's blood fell to the sea, and the waves turned gold. The shadows shrieked, writhing, then dissolved into mist. The blood moon dimmed, and Kyle crumpled to his knees, his eyes glassy but his lips curved in the faintest, most human smile. Elara caught him as he fell. "Kyle, please." His hand brushed her cheek. "The gods take what they're owed. But they can't take what I've given freely. Don't you dare leave me." His voice was barely a whisper. "Then dream for me, Elara. Dream for us both." The waves rose once more, gentle this time, carrying the light from his body out to sea, where it shimmered like 1,000 stars sinking into the deep. When it was over, Elara knelt alone on the black sand, the dawn beginning to stain the horizon pale gold. The bond was gone, but the mark on her wrist still pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat that wasn't entirely her own. She closed her eyes. The sea sighed, and somewhere beneath the waves a single voice whispered, not from the gods, not from ghosts, but from love itself, "I am not gone, little one, only dreaming." Chapter 10. The king beneath the waves, the sea would not sleep. Even days after the blood moon had waned, its tides moved with a strange, deliberate rhythm, as though something alive still breathed beneath. The waves came and went like the slow inhale of a sleeping god, whispering her name with every pull. Elara. The voice haunted her dreams first, soft at first, like a memory trying to be remembered. She would wake with tears on her cheeks, the taste of salt on her tongue, and the scent of iron in the air. The healers called it grief. The priests called it haunting. But Elara knew better. Kyle was not gone. She could feel it. The faint flicker of warmth beneath her wrist where the mark still pulsed, too steady to be phantom pain. Each night when she closed her eyes, she saw him, standing in the dark water, silver chains wrapping his wrists, eyes like moonlight breaking through a storm. And every night she heard him whisper, "Don't forget the dream." The castle had become a mausoleum. The courtyards were filled with lilies, offerings from the southern clans. The priests draped the throne in black silk. Rhea refused to remove Kyle's crown from the dais, claiming the sea would curse any who touched it before his soul was laid to rest. Elara could not stand the silence of it. She wandered the halls barefoot, her hair unbound, wearing only his cloak, still smelling faintly of cedar and smoke. The weight of it dragged behind her like a shadow. When she passed the mirror in the corridor, she stopped. Her reflection did not look like a queen anymore. Her eyes had grown pale, too pale, and the light that had once burned in them was dimming. Taran found her there one dawn, a scroll clutched to his chest. "My queen," he began softly, his tone measured, reverent. "You haven't eaten. The council—" "I do not care about the council." He hesitated, then stepped closer. "Then perhaps you will care about this." He unrolled the parchment. The ink shimmered faintly in the morning light, written in the ancient language of the deep, symbols that pulsed like living things. It's a text from the Codex Maran, recovered from the drowned library of Aelion. It speaks of a place called the Hall of Echoes, where souls caught between life and death wait to be judged by the sea. Elara's breath caught. Beneath the waves, he nodded. If your bond still lives, Majesty, he may be trapped there. That night, Elara walked alone to the cliff above the black shore. The moonlight turned the waves silver, the wind tearing through her hair like fingers of ice. She carried no torch, no guards, only the memory of his last breath and the knife he had used to seal their bond. When she reached the edge, she looked up. The stars seemed closer tonight, watching. "I'm coming," she whispered. Then she stepped off the cliff. The plunge was agony. The cold bit through her skin, her lungs, her bones. The world narrowed into sound. The rush of water, the thrum of her heartbeat, the faint echo of his voice guiding her deeper. Follow the light beneath the dark. Her eyes adjusted slowly, and there it was, faint, far below her, a soft radiance like moonlight on glass. The deeper she swam, the quieter the world became. Fish of strange beauty glided around her, translucent things with eyes like jewels. The seaweed brushed against her hands like strands of silk, whispering words she couldn't understand. The surface disappeared above her, and then the light widened. Before her opened a gate of coral and bone, shaped like an archway guarded by statues of wolves carved from pearl. The gate pulsed with Kyle's mark, the same crescent sigil that burned upon her wrist. As she stepped through, the current stilled. The world beyond was neither sea nor sky, a realm suspended in light and silence. The floor beneath her was made of glass, reflecting the ghosts of stars that didn't exist. And in the center of that vast emptiness stood a throne. He sat upon it. Kyle, alive but not breathing. Chains of liquid silver coiled around his wrists, his chest bare, his head bowed. His hair floated around him like ink in water, and beneath his closed eyelids the faint shimmer of his mark pulsed with light. Elara's hand flew to her mouth. "Kyle!" Her voice broke the silence, and the sound echoed, multiplying, bending, as if the very sea repeated his name. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, his head lifted. His eyes opened. They were not the same. Where once had been moonlight, now burned the sea, dark and fathomless. "Elara," he said, his voice distorted, ancient. "You should not have come." She ran to him, pressing her hands against the silver chains, wincing as they burned her skin. "I will not leave you here." He flinched from her touch, pain flashing across his face. "You do not understand. This is not life. I am bound to the sea's will, to the god I defied. My blood anchors the debt. If you break the chains, the curse returns." Tears clouded her eyes. "Then I will bear it." He shook his head. "The sea would take you whole. I have already given it everything." Something inside him flickered then, a memory. A tenderness fighting through the curse. He looked at her like a man remembering what warmth felt like. "Elara," he murmured, "why do you never listen?" "Because love is not meant to listen to reason," she whispered back. She pressed her forehead against his chest, ignoring the pain, ignoring the burn. Her mark flared, brighter than ever, the light spread, threading through the silver chains, melting them like frost. Kyle gasped. The water around them began to tremble. The sea stirs. The debt unravels. Taran's voice echoed faintly in her memory, warning her of what would happen. But it was too late. Kyle's chains broke. The throne cracked. The light erupted. For a heartbeat she saw it all. Every soul ever claimed by the sea, swirling upward in a spiral of silver light. The current roared, tearing through the hall, lifting them both from the floor. Kyle caught her hand, his grip fierce, his voice breaking through the chaos. "Whatever happens, remember this. Love is older than gods." And then the current pulled them apart. Elara screamed his name as the world dissolved into light. When she awoke, she was on the shore again, her dress soaked, her body trembling. The dawn had come, the sea was calm, and beside her, half buried in the sand, was Kyle's crown, no longer gold but silver, streaked with light. She lifted it in shaking hands. The mark on her wrist still glowed, and from somewhere deep beneath the waves came a voice, distant but alive, strong but softened by love. "I am still dreaming, little one, and I will find my way back." The wind carried the words into the dawn, and Elara, with salt still on her lips and fire still in her heart, whispered back to the sea, "Then I will wait for you, even if it takes 1,000 tides." Chapter 11. The Shore Between Dreams. Dawn bled softly over the horizon, painting the edges of the sea with pale gold. Fragile, hesitant, as though afraid to touch what still belonged to night. Elara stood at the edge of the shore, her bare feet sinking into the cold, wet sand. The hem of her dress was soaked through, her hair tangled with salt and wind. The crown, that impossible silver thing born from Kyle's final breath, lay heavy in her hands. The air shimmered faintly around her, as if the world itself could not decide whether she still belonged to it. For a long time she said nothing. Then, softly, almost reverently, she whispered his name. "Kyle," and the sea stirred. A single wave rolled forward, curling gently around her ankles, cold and alive. The wind sighed, carrying his scent, rain, cedar and smoke, the scent that haunted her even when she tried to forget. She closed her eyes. "I am still dreaming, little one." His voice, low, warm, wrapped in distance. She opened her eyes and gasped. Before her, where sea met air, a faint shimmer appeared, a figure caught between reflection and light. Kyle stood there, his form translucent as glass, his eyes the color of dusk before a storm. He looked exactly as he had before, and yet not. More ancient, more sorrowful. "Elara," he said, voice soft as a tide. She tried to step forward, but her feet wouldn't move. The space between them felt vast, a thin, cruel membrane of worlds. "Tell me it's not just a dream," she whispered. His smile was small, aching. "It is, but it's also more than that." The wind rose, scattering her hair. "How can you be here?" "I'm not," he said simply. "You've come to me." Her brows furrowed. "I don't understand." He took a slow step closer, his figure flickering with the movement. "The bond between us still lives. It pulled your soul toward mine, between the tides of waking and death. You stand now on the shore between dreams." Her heart pounded. "Then I can bring you back. I can—" His expression darkened. "No. You cannot wake what the gods have bound beneath the waves." Elara shook her head fiercely, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Don't speak to me of gods, Kyle. You defied them once. I will do the same." He reached for her, his hand hovering inches from her cheek. The air between them pulsed with longing, the bond thrumming like a heartbeat. But when she leaned into his touch, her skin met only cold light. The contact broke her. "Every night," she whispered, "I wake and reach for you, and every morning the bed is colder. Tell me how to live like this." Kyle's gaze softened. "By remembering that love doesn't die with the body." The sea surged behind him, the water rippling like breath. Shapes flickered beneath the surface, faces, hands, forgotten souls still bound to the deep. Elara saw them and shuddered. "They follow you." He nodded. "The debt was not mine alone. The sea keeps what it's owed. Then let me share it." His eyes widened. "No, you don't know what you're asking." "I do," she said. Her voice trembled, but the conviction did not. "I can't breathe without you. I can't stand in this world knowing you are drowning in another. If this bond means anything, if love truly defies death, then let it bind us fully. Let it destroy or save us both." Kael's jaw tightened, torn between devotion and dread. "Elara, please," she whispered. He closed his eyes. For a long moment, the only sound was the slow pulse of the tide. Then, when he opened them again, his gaze burned brighter, the same fierce light that once ruled kingdoms and crushed armies. "There is one way," he said finally, "but it will cost you your memories of this life. Every laughter, every sorrow, every touch, gone. You will forget your name, your crown, your people, even me. Only your soul will know the way back." Elara's breath trembled. "And if I refuse, then you will wake, you will live, you will rebuild what was broken without me." The silence stretched. The wind softened, carrying the scent of rain and salt. Finally, she lifted her chin, tears glinting like glass. "Then I choose the forgetting." Kael's expression fractured, awe and grief entwined. "You would give up everything?" "I already have," she said quietly. "The night the sea took you." He took one last step toward her. The air shimmered, and this time when he reached out, his fingers met her skin. Warm, real, electric. Elara, Kael. Their foreheads touched. The bond pulsed once, and then the world split open. The sea roared like a beast awaking from 1,000-year sleep. The sand beneath her feet melted into silver light, the waves rising into spirals of fire and moonlight. The sky cracked, revealing the reflection of another world beneath, a realm of dreams and memory, vast and endless. Elara's body dissolved into the current. She felt the weight of her life peeling away. Her name, her fears, the cold crown that had chained her. In its place grew warmth, ancient and familiar. Kael's voice whispered through the storm. "Find me. When the stars forget their names, I will wait at the edge of dawn, and then—" Silence. When Elara opened her eyes again, she stood not in the mortal realm, but within a strange twilight field, neither sea nor land, neither dream nor waking. The grass glowed faintly beneath her bare feet. The air smelled of cedar and the faintest trace of salt. Somewhere, far away, a wolf howled, low, mournful, eternal. And in that moment she remembered nothing of her name, her past, or the man she had once loved. Only that her heart was searching, across worlds, across lifetimes, for something that had never stopped calling her back. Chapter 12. The Wolves of the Forgotten Field. The first sound she heard was wind. It whistled low through the tall silver grass, bending the blades like waves. Somewhere beyond that endless meadow, a river murmured, its song soft and unending, like the pulse of a world half asleep. Elara opened her eyes slowly. The sky above her was neither night nor dawn, a veil of grey light that shimmered without warmth. She lay upon a field that seemed to breathe, the earth cool beneath her fingers, each blade of grass glowing faintly as though lit from within. Her body ached. Her chest rose and fell with effort. She tried to remember why she was there, who she was, but her thoughts came like fragments of smoke, dispersing when she tried to grasp them. Only one thing remained, a heartbeat that was not her own, faint, distant, familiar. It echoed somewhere in the horizon, calling to her like a forgotten name. When she rose, the world tilted. Her reflection flickered in a pool nearby, a face she recognized but could not name. Her hair was longer, streaked with white at the ends. Her eyes, once gold, once silver, once something else, now shone with a soft pale blue light, the color of memory itself. A shape stirred behind her. "Don't move." The voice was low, roughened by disuse, the tone of a predator more than a man. Elara froze. A moment later, a figure emerged from the mist, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair damp with dew. His clothing was torn and blood-streaked, his jaw shadowed by exhaustion. But his eyes burned like fire through frost. Wolves. There were 3 behind him, massive, silent, their fur rippling silver in the twilight. They watched her with unblinking suspicion, their movements too graceful to be entirely animal. The man took a step forward, nostrils flaring. "You're not from this realm." Elara tried to speak, but her throat felt raw. "I don't know where I am." He circled her slowly, like a hunter unsure if what he found was prey or prophecy. That's what they all say when the mist spits them out. The mist. This is the forgotten field. Souls pass through here when the gods lose count of them. Her brow furrowed. "Then I'm dead?" He looked at her sharply. "No one dies here. They just forget why they lived." Something in his words struck her deep. Forget why they lived, yes. That was the hollow ache in her chest. She could feel the absence, the shape of something vital that had been torn away. The man studied her face again, frowning. "You're not like the others. There's a mark on your wrist." She glanced down. The faint outline of a crescent moon shimmered there, glowing softly against her skin. He stepped closer. "I've seen that before." Elara's voice trembled. "Where?" His jaw tightened. "In the dreams of the Alpha-King." Her pulse stuttered. "Who is that?" she asked. The man hesitated, his gaze flickering toward the horizon where the river met the mist. "A name that no longer belongs to this place. Some say he drowned himself for love. Others say the sea kept him for defying the gods." The wolves stirred restlessly, sensing the weight of the words. Elara's throat constricted. "And you? Who are you?" He tilted his head. "Once, I was his commander. Now, I am nothing." His name came to her suddenly, not from memory but instinct. "Taran." He froze. "How do you know that name?" "I don't know," she whispered. "It just came to me." The silence that followed was thick, trembling with old ghosts. Then Taran's expression softened, though his voice stayed rough. "Then maybe you aren't lost after all." The wolves began to move, pacing in a loose circle. One of them, the largest, its eyes an unnatural shade of silver, paused and lowered its head toward her. Its breath came out in a soft huff, the way a creature greets something it cannot understand but somehow recognizes. When it touched its muzzle to her wrist, the mark there flared brightly, and the world trembled. The mist around them rippled outward, revealing flashes of things unseen, a hand reaching through water, a crown falling through light. 2 lovers bound beneath a moon that wept. Elara gasped. "What was that?" Taran's expression darkened. "The past remembering you." He turned toward the river. "Come. The Oracle of Ash waits beyond the crossing. If anyone can tell you who you once were, and why the moon still remembers your name, it's her." As they walked, the land shifted around them. The grass grew darker, whispering with the sound of faraway voices. The air thickened with the scent of rain and something older, sea salt, iron, sorrow. The wolves moved silently ahead, their paws barely touching the ground. Taran walked beside her, his presence both protective and uneasy. At one point she stumbled, and he caught her by the arm. The touch was firm, grounding, and something electric passed through it. He flinched, as though burned, that energy. Elara looked up at him. "You felt it too." He didn't answer, but his eyes, for a heartbeat, flickered gold, the color of the blood moon bond. When they reached the river, it was no longer water but memory, flowing with images of lives and deaths, faces and voices. Elara stepped toward it, mesmerized. Within the current, she saw flashes, her hand entwined with another's, a man's voice whispering her name like a prayer, the taste of salt and tears, a kiss that felt like surrender. Kael, she breathed, though she did not know why that name came. The river brightened, reacting to the sound, and Taran's eyes widened. Elara, he said quietly, that name, it's forbidden here. Why? Because it belongs to the one who was lost to the sea. She turned to him, the wind catching her hair, her eyes burning with that strange blue light. Then that's where I must go. The wolves began to howl, long, low, mournful, as though warning her of what lay ahead. The river stirred, rising like mist, shaping itself into a form that waited upon the opposite shore. A woman, robed in shadows, her face hidden by a veil of dusk. The Oracle of Ash, Elara of the Veil, she called softly. You have crossed time and tide to return to what was undone. The bond calls for its reckoning. The king beneath the waves waits. Taran turned toward her, his voice sharp. You can't mean— I do, the oracle said, her eyes gleaming through the veil. The sea has not forgotten its debt. Nor has love. Elara's pulse thundered in her ears. The river shimmered, beckoning her. Somewhere deep within its depths, a familiar voice whispered through the current, faint but alive. I told you, little one, I will find my way back. And as the wolves began to howl again, Elara stepped forward, into the river of memory, into the dream that refused to die. Chapter 13. The Last Dream of the Silver Wolf. The river did not drown her, it remembered her. As Elara stepped into its current, the water rose not with violence but with recognition. Each ripple touched her skin like a familiar hand, each shimmer of light whispering fragments of a name, a vow, a love that had refused to fade. Taran reached for her, but the wolves held him back, growling softly as the current began to pull her forward. Elara, he shouted, his voice trembling with something that was not command but grief. She turned once, her eyes glowing faintly through the mist. Tell the world he lived. Then she was gone. The river swallowed her whole. But in its depths, there was no darkness, there was memory. Images flashed like shards of mirrored glass. The silver crown, the garden of shadows, Kael's hand trembling against her cheek, the night she whispered she would forget. And beneath it all, a single constant, that voice, find me when the stars forget their names. Her lungs burned, her heart stuttered. She reached deeper, her hands cutting through light that felt like silk and fire at once. Then, warmth. A hand caught hers, strong, familiar. Her body jerked as she was pulled upward through the current. And there he was. Kael, not spectral, not bound, alive, or something beyond life, standing in a vast sea of starlight, his hair drifting around him like ink in water, his eyes reflecting everything she'd lost and everything she'd found again. Elara, he said softly, awe breaking his voice. You came— Her lips trembled. You said you would find me. He smiled, not as a king, not as a god, but as a man who had waited beyond death itself. And so I did. The sea around them began to churn, the stars overhead flickering violently. The world was unraveling, dream and reality collapsing into one. Kael reached for her, pressing his palm against her heart. This place cannot hold us both. The bond, it's too strong. You'll lose yourself if you stay. Then let me lose myself, she whispered fiercely. What's left without you? "Elara," he murmured, his voice breaking, "listen to me. If you stay, you'll be trapped here forever. But if you return, I can follow. The bond doesn't end in death. It transcends it. You must wake. Call me through the veil." Her tears floated upward like tiny pearls. "You're asking me to leave you again. I'm asking you to believe that love has no walls left to conquer." The sea roared, light shattering across its surface. The bond between them flared, molten, uncontainable. Elara leaned in, their foreheads touching. "Then promise me," she breathed, her voice a tremor of faith and fear. "Promise me you'll come back." "I already am," he whispered, and kissed her. The kiss broke the spell. The water exploded into light, flooding the world with the brilliance of two souls becoming one. For a heartbeat, time stopped. The stars bowed, the wolves howled, the gods fell silent. Then the light burst outward, a pulse that raced through every corner of the realm, from the depths of the sea to the farthest reaches of the mortal sky. And when it faded, Elara stood once more upon the shore. The waves were calm, the wind was still, but the world felt alive. Rhea found her there, kneeling at the water's edge, her hair tangled with seaweed, her dress torn. "Elara?" the priestess whispered, trembling. "You've been gone for 7 nights. The sea would not let us near." Elara lifted her head. Her eyes glowed faintly. Not human, not divine, but something between. "He's coming." The priestess blinked. "Who?" Elara smiled faintly, her voice a fragile flame. "The one the sea tried to keep that night when the moon rose, the wolves gathered on the cliffs. Their howls carried through the valley, long, mournful, yet filled with triumph. The wind shifted, heavy with the scent of rain, and then the sea parted. From its heart rose a figure cloaked in silver light, water streaming from his hair, his eyes the same unbroken gold she remembered. Kyle stepped onto the shore, barefoot, crowned not with gold but with starlight. He knelt before her, water dripping from his lashes. "Elara," he whispered, as though speaking her name might shatter him. She touched his face, her hands trembling. "You kept your promise." He smiled, weary, radiant, entirely real. "I told you, love is older than gods. The world would remember that night as the rebirth of Ebonvale." The tides calmed, the forests bloomed again. The wolves no longer prowled the borders but guarded the kingdom in silent peace. The Alpha-King who had once defied the sea now ruled beside the woman who had walked through death to find him. Their reign was not one of conquest, but of devotion. And when storms came, as they always did, the people would look toward the cliffs and see 2 figures standing hand in hand against the wind, the king and his Omega Queen, watching the waves, listening to the echo of the gods who had once tried to keep them apart. Epilogue, the Song of the Moon. It is said that sometimes on the night of the silver tide, if you walk along the shore and the moonlight touches the water just so, you can still hear their voices. Hers, soft as a vow. "I will wait for you." His, steady as the sea, "Then I will always return." And the waves answer them both, endless, eternal. A love story written not in ink but in the language of tides and time.